UFO sightings, I'll probably talk about this later, but the stuff I saw 30 years ago, and it's still in my mind now as clear as it was then. And I couldn't talk about it for about 10, 15 years. I just didn't know how to verbalize it.
Boo-Foons, mystery investigators.
Welcome to the Boo-Foons Mystery Investigators. I'm Dan.
And I'm Steve.
And this week we are joined by Sam from The Thing UFO.
Hello. Good to be here.
Yes, it's brilliant to have you here.
Sorry.
Now, Sam, I found you when I was scrolling through TikTok one day, looking at mysteries, and suddenly there was all graphs on my screen and a man sitting in what looks a bit like a UFO with loads of greenery around them and loads of weird equipment. And all you were talking about was UFOs and things. And I suddenly ended up joining your stream and ended up staying there for hours. And I had actually planned on doing other things, ended up just glued and fixated to my screen. So I also, and I'm aware that you're also on Twitch because I know Steve watches you on Twitch and listens to you on Twitch as well. So we're both very honoured to have you here because, we're both fans of you now.
Thank you.
I think that's us. Yeah.
It's great that we live in a world, isn't it, where sort of niche interest people can kind of find each other and build their little communities and share the knowledge. I think one of my favourite bits about doing this is the people with hearing their stories that you don't get to hear anywhere else, but also every now and again you get somebody that's, I don't know, they're a specialist in a certain area and they'll kind of help you on your journey of understanding the things. So that's my favourite bit, is meeting everyone.
Yeah,
it's nice to be in a place people don't call you a weirdo, isn't it?
Actually, I was expecting the internet to be much harsher, but I think I've blocked 2 people in like the last year. I think it's actually been surprisingly welcoming, and I tell you, for now I'm dyslexic, so my spelling is atrocious, and TikTok has been the only platform that nobody notices or says anything when I make a million spelling errors. I don't even care now. I just go straight out and nobody says anything. So it's very welcoming for them.
Well, they don't care because you're helping them spot UFOs. I mean, if you can do that, then your spellings must be right. Yeah. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe they're wrong.
I like that angle. Yeah, I'm going with that.
Yeah. So The Thing UFO, tell us about the stream and what people can expect when they join you.
So I think there's the intention, and then there's definitely the result that's happened sort of despite my best intentions. So initially it was kind of a collaborative idea that we could do some like live sky watching. Let's look out for UFOs sort of together. In the modern age, we use the streaming way of doing it, see if we can share it. So I moved to this little town in Wiltshire, which until I moved here, I didn't know it had a massive UFO flap in the 60s and the 70s, went on for ages. And I mean, it had landings, abductions, missing time over these years, weird noises, you name it, it had everything. And I thought I knew all of the basic stories, at least, UFO world. I've spent years down YouTube rabbit holes. I would have known, but no, we move here, Google the little town. What is this? How do I not know about this? And so it's kind of we're in the country, the skies are beautiful, there is the phenomena still going on here, and could we merge all that into like a modern version? Because back in the day, I mean, people would travel internationally to this little town. They'd go up to the local Iron Age hill forts that surround the town and watch for UFOs, and they'd have all these sightings and the books written on it. So could we do a modern version of that? And that's kind of how it sort of started, was just these live sky watches. But very quickly we realized that British weather is not conducive to live sky watches a lot of the time, so I needed something else to do that was on theme and to kind of keep the community to kind of gather on those off days there. So we quickly decided to do an alien radio signal hunt there. So I don't know if you've ever seen the film Contact there, or even the new Apple TV series Pluribus. That's kind of talks a little bit about that. It's
yes,
listening out for those ever so rare potentially extraterrestrial radio signals coming in, and its radio's quite easy there. I mean, the bigger the dish, the more sensitive, the more chance you have of getting a signal. But other than that, it's quite easy, and that's what we do when it's cloudy. So a big dish outside comes in, then we have all the monitoring and the analysis of the signals that's kind of coming in live, and we kind of sit there for that, or the sky watches together. We chat about the latest UFO news, and basically just talk aliens, and until something happens, and then normally I swear and mouth agape, and we kind of go from that point. So, but yeah, that's just hanging out, talking about aliens, and hopefully getting some sort of more evidence, or at least probably more questions as the stream goes on. But that's it, really.
So you do. I was going to say, you do these streams without any expectations. So when you do see something, if you see something, it really stands out.
Oh yeah, it does. I mean, it's a bit of it. The sky watches are. I mean, there's normally something strange one per stream. With the radio signals, we've never had any potential signals. We've seen some strange radio anomalies, but probably not alien. They're much rarer. Mm-hmm. But it means that if we do get one, then well, hey, that's it's like winning the old lottery. If you do get one like that. But yeah, it's. I mean, I do sometimes get a bit frustrated, especially if it's like been 2 weeks of overcast skies. We've not done a sky watch, we're just sitting there, and maybe we've not had any signals, and there's nothing in the UFO news. So I might mix it up a bit by playing a UFO themed game or something there, just to kind of save my sanity. But most of the time it's quite good, and it's like anything live, it's more about community than it is about like the actual product. If you're doing so on demand YouTube videos, you've really kind of got to do your research and your prep, and you're presenting some knowledge or an answer or something to the community there. But with the live stuff, it's just about building that community and a little bit of that interaction between people, which I think, even personally, I'm not very social, especially these days, living in the middle of nowhere. It's actually been a lovely little experience to kind of build up a little collection of people that we now know quite well, and you're always meeting new people. So it's kind of the bread of the sandwich is the aliens, but the filling is the community, sort of in that, really. So
yeah, you do seem to have built a really nice community there. It's like almost like you know everybody when you're talking to them. It's like you move people off to the different parts of the spaceship, and you know who's going off.
It really is becoming like that. I mean, in the summer, I think we've offended the algorithm for TikTok lately, because I mean, we were doing, I think it was like 150 sort of concurrent viewers at any one time, and the chat was just, and I try to read every message. That's like my thing, is that I want to hear everybody's stories and talk about it all. So I was hundreds of messages behind. It would take me all night to catch up, but we did it. I pride myself on always being able to interact with everyone if they kind of waited around long enough. And so we've offended the algorithm, so we've shot back down to nothing now, or to much smaller. But it's a tighter community there, so you do really get a chance to actually kind of know people a little bit more, the highs and lows of their life, and all that. Just it's really quite nice. I got engaged recently, so the community knew that, and we got cut. Thank you. It took me 15 years. The missus was starting to get worried. But the community, I'd forgotten that they had my address somehow, and there's I get cards coming through from them, which I thought was absolutely lovely. So it's the reversal of this fragmented world that we live in, where we're also disconnected. It's the kind of the countermeasure to that, which I really love.
Lovely. So your streams, obviously you're sitting at the top, not because I watch on TikTok, so you're normally sitting at the top, and you've usually got little graphs at the bottom with different lines going across. One of them sort of looks like a heart rate monitor that you would get in a hospital. One of them looks a bit different. Now, you sit there, you said about doing a sky watch, and you often sitting there listening to radio signals. How does all of that work?
Well, it's not as hard as it sounds. So the camera that we use for the Skywatch is just a Sony A7, just with a very good lens on it, really, and sits out there on a little pan and tilt tripod. So as the night moves on, we can kind of avoid the moon a bit and point it around for the comfort of the office. But yeah, just sits outside. Sometimes it's rained on. Long HDMI lead kind of comes into my office, which it's starting to look like mission control now. This was meant to be an office for working from home. it's now full on stream studio. As you can tell, it's all been taken over, and I've got 5 monitors normally now at some point, whether it's monitoring either the cameras and the radio, but also the different stream outputs and stuff like that. I'll send you a picture. It's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, send us a picture. We'll stick it on the site.
Yes, I've even got foot pedals as well now. So kind of
Really?
like,
Wow.
Everything.
yeah, it's you know, I kind of get a little bit obsessed with how I can make it more efficient. But yeah, essentially, yeah, a camera comes in, and we pass that basically straight out sort of to the stream with an overlaid grid. So you know, if there's something up there in A2, we can then zoom in on that bit there, or we can, you know, pan the camera around to keep something in shot as it's moving. We were just starting to toy with some custom tracking software that I was making towards the end of last summer, but now the sky's pretty quiet because it's getting dark so early and we're on later. The sun's gone around, so there's not much light for the satellites and other objects up there to reflect. So they're a little bit quieter, not totally dead, but much quieter. But during the summer, when you had 14 or more objects just zooming across the screen, and you're trying to keep an eye and see, right, which one is going to do an anomalous movement, how we can sort of filter out the potential UFO from all the satellites. So we built some tracking software that was plotting their courses, tracking them, and if they deviated, it would flash up red and highlight it there. And it was trying to, with AI, it looked good, but the AI it needed a bit of a kick to kind of learn. It was getting a bit of a deadhead. But yeah, so we was working on that. We'll have to dig that out again for this summer. And similarly for the radio signals, I've got sort of the largest dish that I could possibly sort of fit on my roof there. I had to mount that, and so my neighbours looking up at me going, "What stations are you trying to pick up with that? Aliens?" Like that, you know, what are they going to think? That was a green light. But yeah, so that
they're just thinking the adult channel, aren't they?
Yeah, 4K, you know. So
yeah,
that's a big old dish.
You know, you've decided you're not going for a Fire Stick. You're just going for the biggest dish possible.
We're going old school. I couldn't bear that the internet drops out. No, we're getting that straight from the satellite.
You just want your own wow signal, don't you? That's what it is.
That's what we want. That would be the sort of the eureka one there. But with the radio, they come in from the oversized dish. It comes in amplified, filtered. Because I mean, I'm learning all about the radio. I mean, like all of this, I knew nothing about optics and cameras and seeing things in the sky. Nothing really about radio signals there, but the brilliant point about this is that you start doing it, somebody will correct you very quickly on your lives if you're not doing it right. Sometimes less politely than others, but you'll learn very quickly. And I didn't even know if it was possible to, without having like, you know, a Jodrell bank sized radio telescope, to even have a chance of detecting the SETI signal. So I'm like, is this a flaw? Well, somebody will tell me once I start. But it's all degrees of, you know, of chance of success there. You know, the bigger the dish, the more quieter the signal potentially you can detect there. So we do have a reasonable enough chance with the size dish that we've got, and it's all tuned to this very specific frequency range, which is where scientists think that if ET's out there, that's where they've got the hello, is anybody else out there message, and where the wow signal is heard, and a number of other signals as well. I didn't realize how many signals, anomalous signals, have been detected over the years looking into that. And science has this wonderful way of disregarding a lot of those signals as probably satellites or probably electronic interference. But if you look at their evidence for it, it's just that, well, we couldn't figure out what it was, and we couldn't replicate
they disregard it.
Yeah, they disregard it. There are signals out there they've gone, oh, it's probably a satellite. And then they go, yeah, but no satellite is known to transmit on this frequency. It's not a signal that we've detected again after, you know, what a satellite would be in orbit to come around again. It's not something that we can replicate, but it's probably a satellite. And you go, yeah, I can get, you can't say it's alien, that's fine, but to totally throw it away, that doesn't sound very scientific to me. That's
again, that sounds very much like paranormal investigations as well. When it's like we don't understand it, it's going to be interference. We'll just ignore it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not a ghost.
Yeah. It's a bias. It's going to belief again, isn't it? You know, you've got such a belief in the existing structures there, and it's like, it's fine to have confidence, but you're stepping into belief in religion again.
But
you're also disregarding.
I mean, science only moves on when people look beyond what is the known science at the time. That's the only way we progress.
Yeah,
but to not doing it, to gatekeep so much that you won't accept anything, that stops us moving on, doesn't it? Sure.
It seems to be counter-scientific there, and they say science progresses one funeral at a time. So each generation has its theories, and just human bias doesn't want to shift there. So you have to wait for something new. But you look at all the big leaps; they are all people that were thinking, 12 steps ahead that other people couldn't get their heads around. Even Einstein is well known for being far ahead of the game, and everybody after him for a long period of time. But I think it's treasure hunters and archaeologists, the comparison there. A treasure hunter is willing to take a big risk for a big reward, and an archaeologist is taking very small incremental precise risks for an incrementally small reward there. And I think we have to kind of recognize which version we are, but also the value in each. It's accountants and entrepreneurs. They're very different methods of attacking the same problem with it there, but one side doesn't accept the existence or the validity of the other sort of way of doing it.
It's like there's apparently the historians are doing that, disregarding archaeological finds because it doesn't fit in with any narrative. And it's just, why not just that should inspire you to look further into these things.
That's the exciting bit.
Inspiration, not hide it. You discovered something.
That is, totally with it there. We will learn the specific, lesson, go, okay, we were wrong about this specific one, but it doesn't seem that we ever go to the overall rule of why we keep making this mistake here. You think to go back to like Copernicus there, and the sun orbiting the Earth, and actually it's the other way around. And we can quote that one to the cows come home, but we're still of this scientific bias there that we're special because we're the only intelligent life. And we can't say for sure, but by default, why are we assuming that we are special, with it there? It seems to be, arrogant to think sort of the other way.
Yes, definitely. I do think it is very arrogant and selfish to be like, we are the only planet that has any form of life on it. Out of all of the suns that are out of all of the stars that are in our universe, and even the Milky Way and so on and so forth, the amount of planets that are orbiting each of those stars, there has got to be other life out there. There has to be.
Just look at it every night when we're doing the sky watches, and you're just seeing all of those faint little dots, and some of them are beautifully coloured as well. Like, I didn't realise how colourful they all were there. It's like seeing gemstones on a really clear night. It's just beautiful. But you look at them and you go, is there a planet orbiting that star looking back at us, wondering the same sort of thing there? There are so many of these anomalous signals there. There are so many other techno signatures and biosignatures now that mainstream science is kind of detecting but putting on the shelf or disregarding, that it's looking like actually probably is quite busy out there. Even within our solar system now, we are eventually getting closer to accepting that life is on probably most of the planetary bodies, not necessarily intelligent or complex, but life nonetheless there. So
but the other thing I find is that scientists say, well, laws of physics say we can't travel faster than light. Wormholes, it's just a theory. But I also watched a Neil deGrasse Tyson thing about the universe years ago with my son, and he said the universe is so infinite, space, the universe, everything. There could be parts of out there which don't even have our laws of physics, have completely separate laws of physics. So they may exist in places where we're not restricted by physics, at least the physics we understand. And that's the other thing about what we know. We're still a relatively new species. We haven't had that long to actually learn things and to develop things. We're talking a few hundred years, that's it.
Yeah, like we go, well, there's nothing missing. I heard one the other day, and it was, well, by the laws of physics, it's anti-gravity and things like that, and go, well, by the laws of physics that we understand it now, that there's no missing parts to it. So there's going to be no anti-gravity because there's no missing parts in our equations. But that's if your equations are identifying the full picture there. We thought Newtonian physics was great until we got better equipment and started measuring mercury and going, actually, this doesn't account for everything. So probably looks fine now, but with our limited experiences, and again, they never learn that lesson from it there. Which is always frustrating, but I think it's probably human psychology. You've got the more analytical minded people, and then you've got the more creatively minded people on that side, and we're always going to butt heads, I think.
Yes, that's it. But it's usually the creative minded people who move things on, and it's the scientific minded ones who prove it. It's, you know,
That's it. And well, they're both useful parts of the
yeah.
process, isn't it? It's, you know, it's the creative people that identify the targets there. It's like art and philosophy. They have their place in culture to kind of set the overall direction, the goals, and then it's science's job to really nail that one for efficiency and kind of, you know, dial it in there. You know, they work hand in hand. It's just you make sure you're using the right tool at the right point, I think.
We know there's nuclear submarines out there, but no one can tell me where they are. So does that mean they don't exist? Yeah.
Yeah, that is the thing, and I think having this is when, like, you know, the scientific method, it needs to be used appropriately or not. You know, if we're having a conversation, we're speculating, and we're talking about how rich the world could potentially be, and, you know, where do we allocate our time and our, you know, for our own enjoyment and things, then it's perfectly fine to use sort of these processes to kind of go, well, look, you know, judging by this and past experience, you know, not realizing mountain gorillas were real until, you know, was it 50 years ago or something, they were another cryptid, whatever it might have been there. That's a perfectly fine tool to use, you know, logic and deduction and reasoning there. Now, if I was going to go set up a Nessie hunting business and I'm going to take, you know, millions of pounds worth of investment for my big Nessie harpoon, then maybe a scientific method of let's get some evidence first before we spend the money would be appropriate. But this using the right tools for the job, and I think, you know, when we're looking at how, because you said it earlier, that wouldn't it be interesting, you know, having these as options there? Isn't the world much richer if we hadn't figured it all out, you know, there? It just, that's exciting for me, is, you know, potentially, it doesn't necessarily, any particular thing doesn't have to be true. You're not going to necessarily be disappointed. There are loads of theories and specifics there, and it's probably not that we're going to be right or wrong, you know, it's going to be degrees of right and wrong. You know, there's going to be certain, you know, because we're all human and we're all trying to, with our skills and our best assumptions, you know, trying to answer these questions. You know, we're not unlikely to get them 100% correct, but, you know, 10% here, 5% there, you know, we're slowly uncovering, you know, the answer, aren't we?
Yeah. We're hearing things as well, which are things that even just a few years ago would have been out there completely. I was hearing scientists think now that maybe there is more to our energy, to who we are, our souls, than we, you know, using the traditional word, that maybe we're just tied to a body now, but there's, like, they're saying they're starting to see evidence, potentially evidence of multiverses, you know, evidence of people, you know, serious scientists saying, well, maybe it is a simulation. There's all these things where scientists are considering things and openly talking about things that would have been, you're a nutter 20 years ago or 10 years ago.
100%. Yeah, it is so much more varied, and there are real, you know, still within their scientific communities at this stage anyway, you know, coming with these theories. I remember being a child and going, I wonder if we're in a black hole, you know, some sort of silly, childish, big picture question, you know, what's the universe in, that sort of stuff. And then, as it was a few months ago, comes up, you know, this scientist is talking about actually the mathematics of, you know, this, from the singularity, the center of the black hole, to its event horizon, it's the same maths of from the event horizon to the rest of the universe. So it's mathematically, we could well be in, you know, a black hole there, and maybe that explains, you know, the Big Bang and things like this and stuff. And you go, you know, like that was a laughed out of the hell theory, but, you know, it's just like science eventually kind of catches up. You know?
And that's the recent thing, isn't it? They're actually detecting stars which are further away than they should be for light if the Big Bang was actually what started the universe. It's like those stars there shouldn't be there. If it goes further, that means the Big Bang potentially
pushing all that time back, if that's the correct model for it. And a lot of the things that we hold as like true, you know, especially in the non, when we're not in that specialized field, but like colloquially for our society, like the Big Bang, you know, the dinosaurs with the impact theory there, they're actually quite recent. And there's still a reasonable amount of dispute. It's just we'll safe to the general public. That's what we're thinking at the minute, and that kind of gets as a concrete foundation. But it's always up for debate. And I learned of this weird. I'm going to cram it in here now because it blew my mind, but I'll see if I can do it justice. But it was talking about the distances looking that far back to the out of the universe and things. There apparently is something they think they have detected that is going to be, it's out of the visible universe for us. So because of the universe expansion and light traveling at the speed of light, there we'll never see it. You know, it's always going to be out of our range to see, to detect, but there is something there so massive that we can't even conceive of what it could be, that the gravitational effects of it are pulling galaxies out of the visible universe. And you go, what could that be? We know of some pretty big things, galaxies, nebula, all this sort of other structures there. I go, what the hell is sucking galaxies out of the visible universe that is so big that we'll never see it there. Like, it's so much crazier than we could ever get our heads around, and probably more dangerous as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember thinking that when I was a kid. It's like, okay, our galaxy is there, your universe. What if that universe is just part of, when this child thinking, what if it's just in a teardrop or something? Or, I think it was Men in Black, wasn't it? Wasn't it in a stone? Wasn't there a jewel?
Yeah, it was in around a
universe and a
necklace.
jewel?
But
Yeah.
the distribution of mass in the galaxy and in the universe there is something similar to the distribution of neurons and things like within the human brain. Like at that
I think I've seen
scale.
them mapped, haven't they? It actually looks like
Exactly.
neurons in the
So
brain.
Yeah.
I mean, as above, so
What if?
below. What if? These structures kind of map, don't they, down? And are we just at that microscopic level in the same way that we have whole communities of bacteria and various other cells and things doing their jobs within us? Is it that sort of scale?
Yeah. When the equipment gets better, you can see more and more how smaller. Like I said, we never would have dreamt of seeing the things we can see now when you magnify.
Apparently there's a gap that between like our measurement of like from our scale to an atom, and then from an atom down to like the smallest particle there's like a gap of measurement that is the equivalent of from us up to the galaxy again. There's this big area of sized object that we just don't really know anything about as well. So this again is in the tiny level there is so much that we are yet to discover, let alone the whole quantum world, which really throws everything for a loop. That's just,
Well, sorry, I was going to say there's a couple of things that you've sort of said that I sort of want to circle back to. Like you were saying earlier about aliens and life forms, and saying about the potential for life and different planets. I believe it was Brian Cox who threw out the potential idea of that if there was life, it might, like you said earlier about it might not be the same as us. I believe it was him who said that they might be silicon based, whereas we're carbon based. He thinks if there are aliens, there's a good chance that they could actually be silicon based because that's more abundant elsewhere. So if we did meet a silicon based life form, they would be incredibly different to us.
We by definition alien. Like, are they going to be so different to us that we just wouldn't even recognize it? And that's perfectly ties into something that I think it was the Condine report, which the UK government did in the early 2000s, late 90s, into the UFO, the alien phenomena. And one of the scientists in there came out and basically said, we've been looking at plasma, like plasmoids, so plasma trapped in a sort of magnetic field thing, basically. And we've been looking at them, and they seem to be acting as if they are sentient there. We need to do more research, but it's looking like they're coordinating together, they're reacting to stimulus in the environment, potentially reproducing. So it was the finding of this report that quite probably there is sentient plasma life that is here with us on Earth, but we've not recognized it because A, it's a bit rare, but it's so different from us that we don't compete for resources. We don't need to interact with it because obviously what its experience of the world and its priorities are going to be somewhat different there. But I mean, that's been around for a long time. There are people kind of looking into this area as well.
Could it possibly end up being in this what we think is supernatural? The supernatural realm, the paranormal world. That could be where path this lies. Who knows? That could be where we move off to after we go. When we turn to energy.
Well, this is the end, and I think ultimately there's going to be a real blending between the UFO stuff and the paranormal world. Like, to a degree, it's one and the same. Individual things might be, a little bit more and a little bit that, but I think generally, whatever the area of laws that govern whatever those they are, I think they're gonna heavily tread on each other's toes there. And you're talking about, again, we mentioned that scientists there talking about us being, in a form of virtual reality. How we've, put this headset on scientists is talking about now. And you do this yourself, don't you? Like when you really get engaged in a movie, your focus just goes to the screen, you're in it, and then you kind of step out of it and you're back. And I think the scientist is basically saying that's probably what we're doing now with our sort of our physical bodies. So then does that mean our consciousness is some sort of effects of the quantum world? Maybe it's even on the electromagnetic spectrum there. So is that where these disembodied spirits come from there, and those interactions there? Because how does the EM spectrum affect our physical world? Well, it does start to look a lot like interactions that we are seeing in the paranormal world. Those very subtle high effort, low return interactions.
They could also match up with things like astral projection, remote viewing, all that kind of stuff, because it's people who, the monks, the Buddhist monks who, the Shaolin monks who can put themselves onto different levels of consciousness.
I totally think so. And I used to be incredibly cynical of all of that, a lot of spirituality and all that sort of stuff, crystals, you name it. I was incredibly skeptical. I was still into the UFOs and the aliens, but the other stuff wouldn't come in. But the habit of these things, it's like conspiracy theories. The more you look, the more true they do tend to be, especially at the minute. And it looks that way. And there is, science hasn't gone down a lot of these paths to flesh out the details a lot, but where it has ever so slightly touched on them, you go, wait a minute, we're talking crystals, for example, one from that field there. Well, we use them in radio to set frequencies. There we use the crystalline structure to set the frequency, and if frequency is everything, we're not actually solid objects, are we? We are frequency, which is the illusion of solid because of our snapshot of it. You go, these are very loose fragments. It's definitely not in the scientific realm, but for me it's more than enough to go, let's have a look at that. There might be something interesting there.
That's the other thing about crystals you're saying. Again, when I was growing up, they were just things that loonies had, a bit hippie. My mum she loved them, but now you look at them, they're storing data in crystals.
Yes.
That could last a million years and never degrade. It's like we never would have mentioned this.
Than what we are using for that purpose, and it's kind of been there all along. And I think it's more science just hasn't had a look, to flesh out the details to kind of drag us down that rather than there not being anything to it. And now, is everybody's specific theory kind of right? The people that are into the crystals, is their understanding of that phenomena, is that going to be 100%? Probably unlikely. It's going to be their interpretation and stuff like that. The truth is going to be a bit of this and a bit of that, isn't it? But that's not even in a cynical way there. I think they're going to be right in that sense, and the UFO people are probably going to be right as well. And
it's a bit like medicine. Historically it was a case of herbs, spices, different botanics would be crushed together, and this is the thing that will get you better. And when we went to the witchcraft museum, a lot of the things used in witchcraft and potions are what I have in my kitchen cupboard right now as herbs and spices. But the things with science and the understanding of what is it about that herb, that spice, like we know that the Romans chewed on willow bark to ease the pain in their teeth, and we then know that actually that's because of certain properties that are in there and certain chemicals that are in the willow, which actually, if we extract this, we've now got anesthetic.
Oh, totally. And it goes back to them, we're not learning the overall lesson here. Where every time science goes, this is the definitive textbook on reality, boom. And then next year they go, no, this is the definitive, boom. And they're constantly rewriting. And I think we need to kind of, as a culture, come away and go, right, science is great for the bits it has looked at. If it hasn't looked at it yet, then we use the rest of it as a guide, because you still need a guide, some sort of, at least a very broad compass bearing to send you in the direction. And if we could kind of get that attitude of that's how it works, I think we'd be using science in the real way, in the scientific world, of how it should be used. And we could also then, because our ways of looking at things, we're never going to be 100% right on the specifics, but we're also not going to be right across the whole board as well. So there's flaws in the bigger picture approach as well. We just need to know which way round sort of to use it there. And it reminded me of of when people say, well, there was the Fermi paradox, where are all the aliens? And the science go, we've been looking for years, we've not seen any aliens. But when you drill into what they've looked and what they call looking, it's not really looking at all there. We haven't had the technology to really do deep research. And now we've got more technology to record that data. We haven't got the time to look at the damn data and then analyze it properly. So we're really not looking as well. But when we are looking, we are seeing anomalous things. So, I mean, the SETI at Home project, do you have that?
I was just going to talk to you about that, because I used to have that years ago. I was going to say, is it still going?
So it's well, Yes and no. It was until the other week. It wasn't something you could download
Oh,
still. So I think for the audience, it was, if you don't remember it, back early 2000s, it was the University of Berkeley did it for the SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, that project. And they were basically utilizing everybody's computers at home with this screensaver. When you weren't using it, it would crunch the data that SETI had got from the Arecibo telescope there. So they could get the data in. It was back then computing power to crunch the numbers and see if there's anything interesting in the data. So yeah, there was distributed computing throughout the world there. You'd download the screensaver and it would process it in the background. They did that for a few years, early 2000s sort of time. They stopped it sadly there, but the project itself was still going on in the background. It was only the other week they finished crunching that data. And that wasn't a massive, it was a large data set, but it wasn't like all of telescope data throughout all of history. It was for a few years back in the early 2000s. And it's taken them over 20 years to process that data and go, oh, look, there's some interesting signals in here. So it's a really, like, we're not
years
looking.
later.
Yeah, and the frustrating part is as well that with these signals here, the reason we haven't been able to say, like, the WOW signal, for example, was definitely alien, because there wasn't a second detection from a second dish. And the idea there is that, if I've got my dish, I'm pointing up to that star and I'm going, oh, I've got a signal. There could be something in between me and that star, like a satellite or a reflection or something that's coming in, and I'm thinking I'm looking at that star and I'm getting that anomalous signal. So the idea is, you go, right, I'm getting a signal, ring up my mate with another big telescope outside of the world, they point it at that star, and if they're getting the same signal, then it's coming from that point source there. And if it's off planet and it's a certain type of signal, alien. There's not much, ambiguity around radio and things like that. But we can't get that second signal, that second detection, because mainly they record all this data and it takes them 20 years to notice that there was a signal in the first place. So I go, all right, well, we'll have a look at it now. Well, of course it's not bloody on now, is it? These signals are incredibly energy intensive. Nobody's going to be having the transmitter on the whole time. I mean, we did it as a species once. We sent out a high-powered radio transmission in the early 70s saying, we're humans, we're on the third planet from our sun, and, DNA, carbon-based life form, whatever the message was. We sent it once. So why would, another species necessarily do it all the time? So it's like science is, you ever seen the meme where they're riding a bike and they put the stick in their own wheels and fall off the bike, and they're blaming somebody else? That's science when it comes to, SETI work and detection. It's like, of course you're not going to get information.
Do you think part of this is because they don't want to see anything?
Well, this is actually one thing that has come out recently, that the scientists themselves, they fear making anything public at all, because just of how they would be hounded, and probably would be, by the media, by the general public, of, if they said, look, we've got an anomalous signal coming from wherever, we'd be well, what do they look like? Are they a threat? Are they on their way here? Do they have 5 heads? And then we just got a signal. We can't really do much more about that. So they really, I think it's SETI's actual policy to now not, until they can get much more confirmation, which you're not going to be able to get until you go and visit them and see them. So yeah, I think it is that they don't want to do that analysis there. And again, like for us as treasure hunters, the gold is the detection there. For them, I think it is more in the analytical. We've pushed the needle, we've followed the processes. I'm a good scientist and my peers liked my paper. That's how they get their kicks, whereas we're kind of results driven, and going, right, I want to see the alien, so there.
Well, with you saying about the signal and scientists and their opinions, I saw a thing not that long ago with Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about that disc that was sent out with, this is what a human looks like. And he was saying about the dangers around that there is the potential risk of, if a species manages to pick that up, decipher it, they are a very intelligent species. So therefore, they could pose real danger to us by knowing where we are. And then he caveated it with saying, however, because we've now discovered that Pluto is actually a tiny planet, and we've called it a dwarf planet, and it's because there are moons that orbit some of our planets that are bigger than Pluto. That model was based on Pluto being a planet. So actually we're probably safe, because if aliens are looking for us, they're looking for a star that has 9 substantial planets, and they're looking at the ones on all of them, and they're avoiding us because we only have 8.
If they've got that far, though, they might be able to go, they might be able to realise that there's life there. It would be great if the aliens arrived, and they started another ships overhead and just booming voice, like Pluto is a planet, bitch. It's like they're on our side. Yeah,
there's a whole Rick and Morty episode about that, isn't
there?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the division of what we call a planet, a planetoid. It does start to get sideways, but yeah, I mean, there is a whole argument around METI. So SETI is a search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and METI is messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. And there are people out there that do think we should be sending the hello message, and a lot of people that say we don't know what we're dealing with. That might be a bit unwise. And our good friend and party host Stephen Hawking's, he also mentioned, I think, that he said that it's probably unwise to be sending signals out there. We don't know what's out there, which tells you that he thought there was a high enough chance of not just life, but intelligent life, and intelligent and potentially threatening life, to make that statement. If he was confident as a scientist that it probably isn't life, or these distances truly are too vast, he would have just gone, send all the messages you like, it don't matter. So it shines a light on his opinion towards the possibility of threat there. I don't know where we sit. I've heard some very interesting arguments that look, if you are going to have faster than light travel, or be able to traverse those distances, you probably either would have colonized the whole galaxy by now, at which point we don't see that, or we would have, or you'd have to be so friendly. That's the only way you can cooperate enough to get to that level, and it's beyond me to understand.
The colonizing all throughout the galaxy. How many planets have we seen which are inhabitable for human life? Relatively few, considering that we can't reach any. Maybe the same for any potential alien life out there, that there's nothing that fits its
it's nothing worth it. It could well be. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. We still don't have an accurate picture. I mean, it's only in the late 90s that we realised that other stars had planets in orbit around them. That was the first detection, and that's actually where a lot of the mainstream scientific community and snobbery around alien life is. So, in astrobiological and astronomical terms, the current consensus is that there will be life will probably be very, very common, but it won't be complex life, and it won't be intelligent or civilizations. They've not quite gone the whole hog yet. But a lot of other scientific areas that aren't adjacent, that kind of haven't got the news, they're still pre the discovery of exoplanets there, knowing that other stars have planets and therefore could host life like us. And that's why they're still very, very cynical on aliens are ridiculous as a concept. It blew my mind when I sort of made this connection. I'm sure a million people made it before, but as the species advances, basically we will become more homogenized there. We're already seeing this in sort of biological sex difference between male and females, like physiologically. Now we are seeing that as the environment demands more, we have a unified experience. We all work in offices together now. We all have the same sort of nutritional benefits like that. We're not as we were back in the day, hunter-gatherers, where there was that physical need for differences and different. We are becoming kind of homogenized and starting to look very, very similar there. And when you look at like the Greys or anything like us, so they are this homogenous, all look the same there, and they seem to be sort of a one mind sort of operation there. That's evolutionary speaking where we're on a track for. And if our technology gets to a point where we are so advanced that our experience as individuals is the same, in the same way that central heating can make sure that we're all probably, even though we're far apart, we're experiencing probably a very similar temperature. Imagine if that every detail of our life was like that because of technology, because their platform, we wouldn't need to be different people. it would be bred out
Mm.
that we would be the same. We'd probably think the same because there's no advantage to thinking any differently. And that leads you straight to the Greys,
Yeah.
straight to that alien that we're seeing, or maybe seeing, people are reported seeing there. You just go, that's another thing, go, that tracks, that makes sense,
Well, there's that
It's-
theory that the Greys, there's that evolutionary thing, isn't there? Of they think that if you were to take the perspective of a monkey in a jungle or a forest, and its first encounter with a human, that's this upright figure with long arms, long legs, these big eyes looking at it, and then
hairless.
suddenly, hairless, net suddenly goes over. You're coming with us, and you're then in a completely different, unknown environment. There's that theory that it's a case of, do we perceive aliens to be like the Greys? Because evolutionary, if we go back far enough throughout our, and an interesting theory that I've been looking at recently is links to memory and DNA, and long-term memory and DNA. It's very fascinating. The current neuroscience that they're looking into, but they think that maybe is that the reason why we perceive Greys as being like that? Because when evolutionary, we were monkeys and chimps and apes and that sort of thing. We would have been scared of creatures that look like us now.
Wow, I
So
like
would
that.
that be the next step? I've seen that a few times referenced. Yeah, no, the neuroscience thing that I've been looking into, it's quite fascinating. There's a few neuroscientists looking into it. They actually think that when you're learning and things go into your long-term memory, it's not so much like you've got a filing cabinet in your brain. They actually think it's rewriting your DNA, that there's proteins that open up, put the information, store the information onto a chain of DNA, and then zip it back up again. And that's what your actual long-term memory is, which is why there are things that we react to
Mm,
that aren't threats now, but
yeah,
were threats
so this is
thousands
just
of
trying
years
to
ago.
explain genetic
yeah,
memory. Yeah,
Yeah,
you've got
remember
yeah.
trying to explain the
Well,
genetic memory and that. Yeah,
yeah, I mean that is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we respond as humans, well, not actually all of them, but that sort of historical trait there, like to movement. If we think it's a snake, basically, that isn't
yeah,
conscious.
Mm.
That is straight. I think it's amygdala just triggers in less than a fraction of a second, and that has been hardwired through evolution. That snake dangerous. Don't even think about it. So we see that subtle
yeah.
movement, and that mechanism is still there. So yeah, it would make sense if we've got that. And I said evolutionary tracking. We would look, like the Greys to the monkeys, and to the Grey. Did we have that back then? There's, I think, a similar argument for the
Yeah.
old uncanny valley, the things that look human but aren't quite, that kind of
Mm.
unsettle us there. What is the evolutionary purpose for that? Because that is a conditioned response. Where has it come from? There, and there's a strong argument with that one. And another one on the Greys being us as well, that was really interesting. A bit on the side, but apparently, genetically speaking, humanity was at its healthiest with that mixing up of the genes there, was at its peak in the 70s. That was when we were kind of at our peak interconnectedness between cultures and countries there, really mixing up that gene pool for a healthy mix. But also we hadn't started poisoning ourselves as much with chemicals and microplastics and things like that. So if you wanted to get a human genome and samples there, the 70s and around that period was the optimal time to get that, which is the peak for abductions.
Yeah,
And
I'm just going to say,
yeah,
abductions,
and the
late
Greys, if
70s,
they
early
are
80s.
us from the future, which is one of these theories there, that evolutionary track there, and they've gone genetically down that way. If they wanted to come back and get gametes and things like that, which is what people report being taken from them, sperm and egg and things like that, it kind of matches. There's probable cause for it. They do seem to be doing that sort of thing. So
I still can't work out what they were getting from the cattle mutilation, because
that is,
those organs are a little bit interesting. Unless they were using the cow's organs to grow human embryos in, who knows?
well, I mean, yeah, you
They
do
often
bovine
wounds were taken out.
serum, don't we, for something, for things. But
Yeah.
I mean, what I've heard of those as well, I mean, are pretty grim for the cow
Mm.
there. But what is the purpose behind that? I did
Yeah.
hear a thing that they were at their peak. Again, not sure how true this is, but I thought it was interesting. That was at its peak during the BSE, mad cow disease spike that we had over here in Europe.
Yeah.
The Americans, they might have been like an undercover sort of CDC thing where they were testing cows at random to see, if they had an issue with it there, but they didn't want to let it out. They go, interesting theory, but I mean, it's a bit.
On the usual unmarked black helicopters were often spotted around the ones in Texas and America where the cows had been mutilated, but they were often spotted in the helicopters, the famous unmarked helicopters. So I think because you've got to go soon, what is your favorite UFO story or sighting or legend or whatever you want to call it?
I'm old school. I think it's the three that I'm most interested in are Roswell, Kingman, and Aztec. So there were three all around the late 40s, 50s, real classic saucer crashing, that sort of thing there. And so Roswell is obviously, just always going to hold a place because it is that pop culture, the entry point for everyone there. I think Kingman's an interesting one again because there's a lot of the connections that have come out later on around the craft that was potentially recovered. Very interesting contextually how that might be a real one there. And I think Aztec was one that was, I think it was Aztec, that was one that was very quickly written off as a hoax there. And now upon looking into it, it looks like it was whitewashed quite heavily, and that's actually got some potential physical evidence for it, and it's quite loose. But I just love the idea that you could go somewhere and touch it, because there's a lot of dispute around where the Roswell crash site specifically was, and obviously that's probably been graded and covered up now. Same with a lot of the others, but I think it's the Arizona one there. The report is that when they were trying to lift the craft with the crane. The locals have corroborated all this as well. The ground was too soft, so they had to very quickly pour concrete pads for the crane to rest on, so they can lift it off and onto the big trucks and to shift it away. And those pads are still out there. There's no reason why there is this roughly poured concrete patches in this area. It's a wilderness area there. There is oil drilling and stuff, but this is nothing to do with any nearby drills and stuff like that. But there are these random concrete pads which are perfectly positioned to support a crane there. And so for me, the idea that you could go get hands-on touching potentially, a part of that process, I think is a little bit poetic and romantic to me. So
that's
they're my top three.
So one day you'll be there yourself.
Hopefully. Hopefully, I would love to do a proper tour. We still need to do a tour of the UK with the Skywatches. That is on our list. We want to do Rendlesham Forest. We want to do the Falkirk Triangle. A lot of the Welsh ones as well. So fingers crossed.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Sam.
Thank you for having me. I get a chance to do a bit of a longer ramble than I normally do. So.
Yes, it's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Fascinating. Thank you.
I've had fun. Lots of fun. It's good to talk shop with people like that. So I only normally get a few interactions on the chat. So deeper conversations are enjoyed.
And maybe you can come back one day and talk to us about ghosts.
Up to 100%. If you'll have me.
Absolutely.
I've got a few more experiences there. So
definitely. We'll definitely get you back on if that's okay with you.
100%. Yeah.
Fantastic. So do go to Twitch and TikTok and search for The Thing UFO, and you can see Sam doing all of his alien stuff, looking for alien life and signals. It's quite fascinating. You'll probably see Steve and I lurking in the chat somewhere because we both love the work that Sam is doing. And yes, thank you for listening today. As always, do look at all of our socials, check out the Patreon and for the full length version of this episode in video form. And yes, we'll be here next time.
Boo-Foons, mystery investigators.